Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Good morning, what's good? You know the vibes. Jon Jeune here at the real Jon Jeune _FF, and welcome back to another live episode of the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. It is week 15 and fantasy playoffs are officially here. There's nothing more that needs to be said. They're here. All we got to do is win. All right, one wrong move, the season can end for us. So we got to be locked in. We got to be on point. One right move can send you to the semis. Or maybe you're on a bye week. You're chilling right now. So today we're breaking down every matchup on the week 15 slate. And of course, we're going to look at my starts of the week and help you lock in those high upside plays. So whether you're chasing points, protecting the lead, or chilling on a bye week, definitely got you covered today. Before we get into it, just make sure you check out the FFDX Patreon. Join for free to go get the FFDX cheat sheet or become a supporter for just $1 a month to unlock the weekly waiver wire article, expanded rankings, and our Sunday morning Q&A, which this week will be on Saturday at 8 p.m. will be the Q&A. So just head to patreon.com/FFDX. And all right, let's lock in. Week 15 matchup show starts now. So recapping week 14. One, I was like in it. Felt like a good week overall. But I think it's just because we had a lot of the guys that we did hit on were some, we had some pretty good performances mixed in there. But all in all, when I looked at it and tallied it all up, it was not a great week. 13 total recommendations. We had 7 misses of either variety, 5 big misses, two misses. Tyrod Taylor, he was injured. Chris Rodriguez, only 5.2 PPR points. Bam Knight, 6.4 PPR points. Troy Franklin, 4.1 PPR points. I think the Troy Franklin dream is dead. That's officially over. Jaden Higgins, 6.4 PPR points. Samaje Perine, 4.8. Kyle Monunga, 8.7. Bam Knight, Jaden Higgins, both in really good spots. Going forward, both guys that I do like. Chris Rodriguez, I like his opportunities, but if he's injured, which he is right now, then or he's dealing with something, we don't know if he'll miss the game. But he's a guy that I like his opportunities that he's been getting. I like the matchups that are coming up. So, Samaje Perine, that was kind of like a shot in the dark. I'll be honest. I was taking that shot in my league, did not come to fruition. So, hopefully that didn't kill anybody. And then Kyle Monunga, 8.7. I think he's got solid bounce back potential this week. So, not overly concerned about him. I think it was just bad week in general. One that I feel really bad about is the Lamar Jackson one. I had him down as a reverse recommendation. So, talking about a guy that did feel great about going into the matchup last week against Pittsburgh. And, he was ranked as a QB8. He finishes the QB8, 21.1 standard quarterback points. So that's obviously great to see. But, I was pretty adamant. I wasn't interested in playing him, over some other options like a Jacoby Brissett. And so, it's good to see him bounce back. And as we enter the fantasy playoffs, he's ready to go. So, and in terms of what we did hit on, Tyler Shuck, 21.3 fantasy points. Tony Pollard finishes the RB2 with 28.1 PPR points. Cooper Kupp, 11.5 PPR points. That one, we felt like we kind of got, that touchdown was a little, it saved us. Let's just say that. Trevor Lawrence finishes the QB10, 19.4 PPR or 19.4 standard quarterback points. And then Kamani Vidal, 11.4 PPR points, finishes the running back 21. So, Overall good finish for him. So like I said, the guys we did hit on, we hit on in a big way. Um, you know, a quarterback one, the running back two, a wide receiver two, another quarterback one, and a running back two. So let's move on to week 15. Keep it rocking and rolling. And weather this weekend seems to be okay. It's just gonna be cold. You're in the Northeast. You're like, okay, yeah. Tell me something I don't know. Um, so nothing really concerning from that perspective. But let's jump into the games here, starting with the Las Vegas Raiders and the Philadelphia Eagles. And yeah, there is this thing I don't like about this format of this show. I know, right? I did it myself, but is that I feel like forced to pick somebody from each game, which sometimes is like it's kind of fun, but other times it's really not. So with the Las Vegas game and Philly game, and you know, if you're watching for the first time or you're listening for the first time, welcome. But also you might be wondering, like, well, why can't you just pick like a Devontae Smith? Well, Devontae Smith was ranked 19. The threshold is 20. So I could cheat, which I have before, and just pick a guy that's like on the border, like, hey, he's the wide receiver 20, so let's go with him. Um, but this just it didn't feel right today, so I'm going with Jack Beck of the Las Vegas Raiders, the wide receiver 70 according to expert consensus rankings. And what I will say is he's been more involved in the offense the last 2 weeks. Last week played 81% of the snaps, had an 18.5% target share, ran 83% of the routes. Those were all season highs. And he caught 6 catches on 6 targets for 50 receiving yards. So I would look at him as a wide receiver 4 with some wide receiver 3 upside, but I'm not going to sit here and say he's a good play or I'm excited to play him or that I'm even playing him in a fantasy playoff. You shouldn't be that desperate. If you are, then you must be in a really deep league, or yeah, you must be in a really deep league, or you really just like playing Jack Beck. That's really what it comes down to. So, um, again, he's a wide receiver 4 with some wide receiver 3 upside. That's as best as it's going to be. So maybe it's going to help somebody out there, but I would imagine that the average person in a 12 team, 10 team, 12 team league is not playing Jack Beck. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Uh, well, actually, let's stick with this game for a little bit. All right. Ashton Genty, I think people are probably wondering, like, what do you do with Ashton Genty this week? It hasn't been all good all year for Ashton Genty, and now we're walking into a matchup here against Philadelphia. He's playing with the backup quarterback in Kenny Pickett. So, you're probably wondering, like, hey, can I play him? Can I trust him this week? And I think the question is, yeah, I think you can, right? This Philadelphia defense has not been very uh, strong against the run in recent weeks. They allow the 8th most PPR points to opposing running backs. So they are beatable on the ground. When I was looking at this yesterday, Genty, I believe, is the running back 19 according to the expert consensus rankings. So, um, right on that borderline of a mid-tier RB2. So, yeah, I think that's about where he is. Maybe like RB15, just based on the matchup, right? Uh, AJ Brown, I think you stay in the flames with him. Obviously, Brock Bowers, Devontae Smith. Actually, Devontae Smith is the wide receiver 20. Um, and I got a question from a good friend of mine. He's asking me, "Hey, Devontae Smith or Lad McConkey?" And my initial gut was hey, Lad McConkey. And while I looked at my rankings and I have Devontae Smith or my projections, I should say, I have Devontae Smith slightly higher. Um, I still lean Lad McConkey. Just I like the matchup there better. He is the number one target as opposed to the number two target, but I think Devontae Smith, definitely a guy you can play. I still saw at least 8 targets last week. Just the quality of targets that were coming from Jalen Hurts not the greatest last week, so that's not something that that's new for Devontae Smith to have to overcome, right? Like him and Jalen Hurts have pretty good chemistry, so not something I'm overly concerned about. What I think would probably concern me is the potential weather here. Is roughly freezing, winds around 10 miles per hour. The winds are not as strong, but the freezing part, I guess, not ideal. But in the grand scheme of things, it shouldn't matter. The cold doesn't matter as much as the wind matters. So maybe less of an issue than I had originally stated. And then Dallas Goedert, I am not touching Dallas Goedert this week. He's the expert consensus wide receiver or tight end 18. So I guess a lot of people agreed. I mean, he was the guy I was coming in here to say, hey, we're not playing him. But tight end 18, I couldn't justify coming on here and saying that. But I said it anyway. So look at that. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk Arizona versus Houston. And I'm going to go with Houston quarterback CJ Stroud. He's the expert consensus quarterback 17. Now, like I mentioned in the waiver show, the Texans defense makes it a little bit hard to trust CJ Stroud because it caps the upside a little bit with how good their defense is, right? You look at this game and you look at Jacoby Brissett, and Jacoby Brissett is actually ranked, I think it's probably the lowest he's been ranked in weeks. The quarterback 22 for Jacoby Brissett, which makes sense. Totally makes sense to rank him that low. I tend to value consistency, especially in recent weeks when I'm doing my rankings. So I've got Jacoby Brissett a little bit higher as a quarterback 16. But when I look at CJ Stroud, I think he's better than the quarterback 17. I think the upside is probably not going to be there, right? He's not going to have the upside of a Matthew Stafford or a Drake May or a Joe Burrow, right? He's not going to have that upside, just especially given the nature of the matchups that he finds himself in, right? His game has a 42.5 point total. He's a 9.5 point favorite at home. So that's not, and then how good his defense is, right? 26th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over the last 3 games. It makes you weary that he could actually bring back some pretty good fantasy value. However, when you look at the matchup for Stroud, Arizona allows the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. I think it gives Stroud a very nice floor going into this matchup against Houston, whereas, again, the upside may not be there, but if you just don't want the floor to fall out from under you, then, Stroud is definitely an option. And hopefully you were listening to Waiver Show and you checked out the cheat sheet, and maybe you started Kirk Cousins last night. But CJ Stroud, definitely an option. All right. Bam Knight. Can you start Bam Knight this week? Probably not. That's probably like a next week thing. Actually, no, we were looking to start Bam Knight this week, right? Because he plays Arizona this week. I think he is in Arizona. What am I talking about? Sorry, guys. Bam Knight, can't play him this week. Houston's run defense, middle of the road, but with the game script, it's tougher to trust the Bam Knight. Jaden Higgins, I think, is a solid play. I love the spot that Nico Collins is in, and yes, I think you could play Dalton Schultz, even though he screwed us last week. All right, and then obviously if Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't play, then Michael Wilson is the wide receiver 1, of course, right? All right, let's move on to the next game. We've got the Buffalo Bills against the New England Patriots, and let's talk New England tight end Hunter Henry. He's ranked as the expert consensus tight end 15. Back-to-back games as a tight end 1, at least 6 targets in 4 of his last 5 games, including 3 straight games with 6 targets. And Buffalo has allowed the 17th most PPR points to the tight end position over their last 3 games. So, this game obviously should be an interesting one, right? Buffalo lost to New England on their home turf, and now they're going to see if they can return the favor in New England as 1.5 point favorites. So, this game has a 49.5 point total. There's, like I said, a lot of intrigue going into this game, especially what it means for the AFC landscape and the playoffs. Um, but as I look at it, it has the makings of being an exciting game, but I also would not be surprised if it's like a defensive like showdown, right? Um Travion Henderson, I want to go all in on Travion this week, right? He's the expert consensus running back 18. I have him ranked in the top 20. Um so I want to go all in this week, right? Buffalo run defense has not been great. Although over the last 3 games, they've allowed 20, they're the 25th most PPR points to opposing running backs. So, um, got to see what's going on in there. But just like even last week, they gave up a top 6 finish to Chase Brown. So, I'm still gonna stay in the flames here with Travion. All right, let's move on to the next game. We've got the LA Chargers hosting or traveling to Kansas City to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm looking at running back Omarion Hampton. He's the expert consensus running back 27. Um, Now, he looked like he was on a pitch count last week in terms of the snaps, 15, but he still managed 15 total touches, which led to 14.7 PPR points. Kansas City allows the 20th most PPR points to opposing running backs. So Hampton, he's a guy that he started out slow a little bit. As I think he was getting his feet wet, the game started slowing down for him. He looked light years better than he had, in the preseason and the start to the season. And I think, the first half of the game, you could see the fresh legs, and then you could also see some of the youth and the inexperience a little bit, in just terms of not getting north and south, taking a little wide sometimes, which is what he was doing in the preseason. But then as soon as he gets downhill, man, it's really hard to stop that man when he gets going downhill, and I'm sure the Chargers coaches are harping that to him to get north and south, square his pads, and he's a big man, so just run through people, and he probably will still continue to see Vidal in that backfield, but I think Hampton, we'll start to see him ramped up a little bit as we go on. So, um, anyone else in this game? Gadsden, like I've talked about. I didn't talk about it here, but uh, he's a guy that I can't trust this week. Uh, I put him in the cheat sheet as a sell candidate, selling the idea of him as a tight end one. Um, I just can't. I can't do it this week. I don't think I could do it next week. I probably can't do it the week after. It's in a weird spot because I don't feel comfortable dropping him because I don't want someone else to have him. And then, and he starts going off again. Plus, like, I think you could do worse at tight end. So if I can't find a guy to stream, then I will play Gadsden, but that's kind of where I'm at. Xavier Worthy, unplayable. Um, Keenan Allen, unplayable. Quentin Johnston, unplayable. Lad McConkey, I will play. I will play in this matchup. 6 most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. I think he's the only guy in that passing offense that we can trust right now, especially with the limited Justin Herbert. On the Chiefs side, Mahomes not in the best spot, but I think you can play him. And Travis Kelsey, you can play him, and yeah, that's it. Oh, question probably some people were wondering, can you play Vidal this week? I think if we played Vidal this week, we would, and expecting what we got last week, we would be in trouble. I'll say it that way. Um, Matchup's a little bit worse this week than it was last week. He did out touch Hampton and outsnap him last week. However, if you imagine that Hampton's workload goes up, that workload's got to come from somewhere. So Vidal's is probably going to go down. You got the worst matchup this week as compared to last week. Would I be surprised if he scored double digits? No, but I think it's a low upside play for Vidal. But I totally get it if you're desperate. All right, moving on to the next game. Let's talk Cincinnati versus Baltimore. And let's talk Baltimore tight end Isaiah Likely. He's the expert consensus tight end 16. And I'm surprised by this. The tight end 16 seems kind of low considering they play Cincinnati this week. That's the analysis. They play Cincinnati. No, back-to-back games with at least 12 and a half PPR points. And Fantasy Footballers, great podcast, great guys. I was watching a clip from their show recently, and Jason highlighted a stat from someone, I forgot who it was, so I apologize, that the tight end 2 for Baltimore averages 8 or 9 fantasy points. Like the tight end 2 in terms of routes for Cincinnati, against Cincinnati, averages 8 or 9 fantasy points, which is like not groundbreaking, right? You know, if you put a tight end in your lineup and you get 8 or 9 points, like you'll feel pretty fortunate, right? That you got that. You're like, yeah, well, you know what? Could have been better. If he scored a touchdown, you know, maybe I get 14 or 15, whatever, right? But you'll take 9 points. So Isaiah Likely, this seems like a no-brainer. It just seems like very easy. He could have had, you know, more fantasy points each of the last 2 weeks with, you know, a touchdown call back each week. So, you know, if we're staying in this game, right, like Lamar Jackson, yes, I'm playing Lamar Jackson, right? I said it last week. I need to see it from him, right? I need to see that he's healthy, he's good to go. So I'm running a little bit more last week, ran in a touchdown. So yes, I will play Lamar Jackson this week. Cincinnati allows the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. Joe Burrow obviously staying in the flames with him. Chase Brown, he's been on a run. Came through at the start of the week last week. So yeah, continuing to play him there. And then Mike Gesicki, I think solid play this week. I know he was somebody I threw out on the waiver show, but obviously if T. Higgins is out, I think, there's a little bit more upside there for a Mike Gesicki. And then Zay Flowers, Cincinnati allows the 32nd most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. Now, there could be reasons for that, right? Is it that they're so bad against the tight end? Teams are hyper targeting the tight end, right? So there's a tight end funnel team. That's possible. But Zay Flowers had a big game last week. If it wasn't for that big game last week, we're probably not playing Zay Flowers, right? But because of that big game last week, now we're considering playing Zay Flowers. I've got an interesting decision to make in a league of mine, right? It's either like Trey Flowers or Zay Flowers or Chris Olave. I mean, I can start both technically because it's super flex. But I'm trying to decide between like Zay Flowers, Chris Olave, CJ Stroud, and Marcus Mariota. I'm trying to choose between. I'm trying to pick two of the 4 with only one of them being a quarterback. So it'll be interesting. I'll probably take it all the way up to game time on Sunday, but we shall see. But right now, Zay Flowers and Chris Olave are both in there. I'm just going 2 receivers. Probably depend on how my matchup does the rest of this week. I mean, obviously Thursday night happened already. I had Bucky Irving and Bijan, so solid performance from the 2. So if it continues to look good, I'll probably will make my decision based on that. But this isn't about me. This is about your fantasy team. So let's jump into the next matchup here. We got the New York Jets against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going New York Jets tight end Mason Taylor. He's the expert consensus tight end 25. Looking bleak for the Jets offense this week, right? Brady Cook, the Jets undrafted rookie at quarterback, is probably going to make the start. Last week, Taylor led the team in targets with 8, and Jacksonville is the second worst team against tight ends over just on the season, not over the last 3 games, but on the season. So puts Mason Taylor in a good spot. Other than that, I'm not trusting anything else in this Jets passing attack. Breece Hall, I'm just gonna stick him in there and hope I get what I get, and that the volume gets me there. But I'm not excited to do that. On the Jacksonville side, Trevor Lawrence looks like he might be in a good spot, right? He's the expert consensus quarterback 11. The Jets, however, a 30th in terms of fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. That very well could be because why do you need to throw the ball on them when you can just run the ball on them? Travis Etienne in a great spot as the Jets allow the most PPR points to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. But Jacoby Myers, I think solid play. Brian Thomas, good to see him back, but I'd still go Jacoby Myers over Brian Thomas. And Brenton Strange, I think, didn't come through last week, but I like the spot he's in this week. So he's a guy you could play. All right, moving on. Let's talk Washington versus the New York Giants, and let's talk New York Giants running back Tyrone Tracy. Before the injury last game, he had back-to-back games with 20-plus touches. Washington has allowed the 7th most PPR points to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. Staying in this game, if Chris Rodriguez is limited, can't go for whatever reason, the Corey Krosky merit becomes a little interesting, right? Because I think we obviously know, I don't think Jeremy McNichols is going to be a full-time running back. I think that they like him and the stuff that he does in a passing game, but I think if they have to turn around and hand the ball to a running back, 15 times, it's going to be Corey Krosky Merritt if it's not Chris Rodriguez. So definitely something I'm keeping an eye on as we get closer to Sunday. Question I have, I want to know is Jackson Dart, can we start him, right? And I'm starting him in a league. Obviously, we know the upside. He's ranked as the expert consensus quarterback 8. I have him as the QB 10 right now. I would have him much higher if you could guarantee me that we would see him, running the ball like we saw him at the start of the year, and part of what made him such a viable and valuable fantasy asset. But last week, as I suspected we would see, exactly 0 designed quarterback runs, right? It was the only game that he has started this season in which he did not see a designed quarterback run. And I think that was by design. Now, he's still going to scramble. That's part of who he is. That's just in his DNA. You can't take that out of him. But I think the Giants are making a concerted effort to protect Jackson Dart in a lost season. So if he's not running, it limits the upside just a little bit, right? But the matchup here is still very good, right? So it's something that I'm kind of going back and forth with. I think we know the upside of Jackson Dart, and I think you just kind of have to hope that he can get there through the passing game, and that he could get there on his own as a scrambler, right? So Marcus Mariota, I think he's in a very good spot here as well against the Giants, allowing the 7th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. His weapons are in a very good spot with Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel. Also, I didn't talk about Theo Johnson, but he's in a great spot as well. I have a feeling we'll talk about him a little bit later. If you know, you know. But yeah, let's move on to this next game here. Let's talk the Chicago Bears against the Cleveland Browns. And let's talk Chicago running back DeAndre Swift, he's the expert consensus running back 25. At least 17 opportunities the last 2 weeks, and then Cleveland allows the 6th most PPR points to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. All right, we saw Tony Pollard go absolutely nuts against them last week. Now, I don't expect Swift to see all of the work, but I expect him to see most of it, which is why he's the running back I have tagged here. Although I think Calvin Guy also in a very good spot and a guy that you can play this week. Now, Colston Loveland, I think, is also very interesting. Cleveland allows the 11th most PPR points to opposing tight ends. Harold Fannin is a guy that obviously, we've rode the roller coaster with Harold Fannin, but right now it's at an all-time high. Talked about him in the cheat sheet. He's a guy that, and I say that to say, not that I just talked about him in the cheat sheet, but what I did mention is that if you look at what he's done with Shedeur Sanders, right? In 3 full games with Sanders, he's seeing one more target per game, along with 4 more receiving yard or 4 more yards per reception, right? And to put that in perspective, he's on a 17-game pace of 124 targets for 85 receptions and over 1,100 receiving yards. That's his 17-game pace in 3 starts with Shedeur. Now, again, very small sample size, but it just kind of shows you like what kind of run he's been on, right? Leads all tight ends in target share during that span. So Harold Fannin, he's ranked as the tight end 4, which 100% makes sense. He should be ranked at least within that top 5 this week. I think my initial rankings in the cheat sheet, I had him 7, so I was probably a little bit lower than he should have been. But in the expanded rankings, he's definitely in the top 5. So, and I say that because the expanded rankings is the cheat sheet rankings is more of like a first draft of the rankings. And then once we get more information throughout the week and I start doing some more deep dives, then I switch things around. But Shedeur Sanders, I know I put him on a waiver show. Honestly, I would put JJ McCarthy above Shedeur in the waiver show, or if I could do it again. But Shedeur Sanders, I think if you are in a 2-quarterback league, you really need help, you're very desperate, then yeah, he's a solid play this week. But I'm not clamoring to play Shedeur this week in this matchup. Not that the matchup's poor or anything, but it's just not. I'm not excited to do it. And then the wide receivers, Odunze injured, returned to limited practice. He could play potentially, but I'm not excited. This matchup's not great. If Luther Burden plays, I'm not that excited either. Although I feel like you could probably get away with it with Luther Burden, just given the nature of his role. But not excited. All right, let's move on in the next game here. We got the Indianapolis Colts against the Seattle Seahawks. Oh, that is not the... Did I miss a game? Nope. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Okay. No, I didn't miss a game. All right. Let's talk the Carolina Panthers against the New Orleans Saints. And let's talk Carolina running back Chuba Hubbard. He's the expert consensus running back 31. 58% snap share last week, or not last week, but in week 13 when we saw the Carolina Panthers, saw 19 touches, scored a touchdown, was a top 10 running back in PPR scoring. I think he'll continue to share that backfield with Rico Dowdle. I think you can play both of these guys. I think if you have both of these guys, you can play both of these guys. Probably a suboptimal move, potentially, but I think you can get away with it for sure. So he should continue to share that backfield. New Orleans has allowed the 10th most PPR points to the running back position, so it makes Rico Dowdle and him very solid plays. They are ranked Chuba Hubbard 30, RB31, Rico Dowdle RB23. I have both of these guys well within RB2 territory. I have Rico Dowdle in my top 15, and I've got Chuba Hubbard in my top 24. So, um, again, both these guys I think are solid plays this week, and you can definitely get away with that. Any other options in this game? Not. Look, Tyler Shuck, it was great last week, but I'm not doing it this week. Bryce Young, he was great the last time we saw him. Also not doing that this week. Um, and Juwan Johnson, you guys know how I feel about him. This is probably one of his worst matchups that we've seen in a while for him. So, um, yeah, he's a guy that I think, again, we can play, but not necessarily excited to play this week. Oh man, I just want to share something with you guys. I was like all like start of the week, I was like, hey, you know what? Like, do I go Kyle Pitts or Juwan Johnson in my lineup? I have multiple leagues with Kyle Pitts and Juwan Johnson. It's actually pretty crazy how many leagues I have with that combination. Probably because when Kyle Pitts was sucking, I needed help and Juwan Johnson was doing things. So this is a dynasty league, by the way, dynasty leagues. And boy, I was like going back and forth. Kyle Pitts, Juwan Johnson, Kyle Pitts, Juwan Johnson. And obviously, you guys know how I feel about Juwan Johnson, but you really know how I feel about Kyle Pitts. And Kyle Pitts has been balling lately. So I was like, I got to get Kyle Pitts in the lineup. And I was so happy I did. So happy. Anyway, that's thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Anyway, let's move on to the next matchup. Let's go Indianapolis versus Seattle. Right. This game outside of like Jackson Smith and Jigba, not very interesting to me. But let's talk Seattle running back Kenneth Walker, expert consensus running back 22. I think just going to follow the volume here with Walker. He's seeing double digit touches basically every week. Over the last 3 weeks, he's seeing a 50% running back rush share in this backfield, compared to 39.7% for Zach Charbonnet. He's got a 14.5% target share, which I think is great. No running back on the Seattle Seahawks has more than a 3.9% target share. So I think the fact that he's just getting this volume and it's just not hitting in the way that we would like it to, is just grounds to just keep playing him, right? Indianapolis allows the 11th most PPR points to the running back position over their last 3 games, so it puts Kenneth Walker squarely. We just need the volume to hit. We just need him to fall in the end zone, really. But obviously, Jackson Smith-Njigba should have a very big day here. He is the wide receiver 1, but he's not my wide receiver 1 this week. And I guess the biggest question people have is like, what do you do with the Colts, right? They're starting Riley Leonard, right? They just signed Phillip Rivers to the practice squad, so they're trying to replace Daniel Jones the best way that they can. I think the only option I would trust conceivably would be Michael Pittman Jr., but I'm not playing Michael Pittman. I'm not playing Alec Pierce. I play Tyler Warren. That's about it, right? I mean, Tyler Warren is ranked as a tight end 7. I think I have him ranked in my top 10 for sure. Seattle allows the 8th most PPR points to opposing tight ends over their last 3 games. I think Tyler Warren's one of those guys that they'll find a way to, like, when you are hurting at quarterback, right, or you're struggling to get things going, good offensive play callers know how to manufacture offense. And we've seen Tyler Warren used in different capacities throughout the year. So I would not be surprised to see a lot of Tyler Warren playing Wildcat quarterback, a lot of Tyler Warren in the backfield, a lot of Tyler Warren, being used as a rusher. So I think there's some creative things that are going to happen with Tyler Warren in this game, which make him a little bit more intriguing. Then obviously I think he not that he normally would, but I think the usage will probably, let's just say that I think the usage is going to be, very, very uplifting, right? If you're a Tyler Warren manager, you're going to watch this game and you're going to be like, oh, wow, I'm really glad that I have Tyler Warren because look at what they're doing with him, right? Jonathan Taylor, I think you just play him, right? I think you hold your nose, you play him. Seattle allows the 29th most PPR points to a running back position over their last 3 games. But there's any way the Colts win this game, it's on the back of Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Warren. There's any way, right? So Rashid Shaheed, he's interesting, right? Because last week I wanted to talk about him over Cooper Kupp. I just couldn't bring myself to do it just because Cooper Kupp was running more routes, and I was like, ah. And then Rashid Shaheed goes out and catches like 5 for 67 or whatever it was, and I was like, I should have brought up Shaheed until Cooper Kupp caught that touchdown. So, but Indianapolis allows the third most PPR points to wide receivers over their last 3 games. That makes Shaheed a little bit more interesting there, considering recent weeks. AJ Barner also somewhat interesting at the tight end position. Elijah Arroyo seems to be dealing with a knee injury, so that makes AJ Barner all that more interesting. All right, let's talk about this next game here. We've got the Detroit Lions against the LA Rams. And let's talk Jared Goff, right? He's the expert consensus quarterback 12. Los Angeles, the Rams, that is, allow the 14th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. I love the spots his weapons are in, right? I talked about how I don't have JSN as the number 1 wide receiver on the week. That's because I have Puka Nacua as the number 1 wide receiver on the week because Detroit allows the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. So this is the highest scoring game on the slate, 54.5 point total. It's a revenge game. Like we always talk, revenge game for Matthew Stafford. He's going back to take on Detroit. But it's a revenge game for Jared Goff. He was a throw-in in the deal, right? The throw-in the deal. So that being said, Goff, I think, great spot. I love the spot his weapons are in. So, yeah, he's definitely, squarely in play as a QB1. Matthew Stafford, love the spot he's in. This game has all the makings of a shootout. Detroit allows the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. So you combine that with the spot that the receivers are in, Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, if he can go, which I think he'll go. And then obviously you have the options on the other side with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams being in great spots. I think the question people are probably going to ask is, what do you do with, obviously you're going to start Jahmyr Gibbs, you're going to start Kyron Williams. What do you do with the backups? What do you do with Blake Corum and David Montgomery? David Montgomery, I cannot play him. I could not bring myself to play him. The matchup, 24th most PPR points allowed to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. The LA Rams allow, and you're banking on him getting a touchdown, getting in the end zone there, which obviously very likely to happen in a game with 54.5 point total. I just can't bring myself to do it. Blake Corum, we talked about this. I don't think there's going to be. I think that he scored the most PPR points he'll score all season last week, unless barring an injury to Kyron Williams. So 28th most PPR points Detroit allows over the last 3 games. Blake Corum, I think, will be sprinkled in, get some touches here and there, but I'm not banking on him getting double-digit touches with, a touchdown mixed in there. So, but overall, love this game. Love the environment here. Let's talk the next game here. Let's talk Tennessee taking on the San Francisco 49ers. And let's talk Seattle or San Francisco wide receiver Jon Jennings. He's got double-digit PPR points in 4 of his last 5 games. He's ranked here as the expert consensus wide receiver 22, going into a matchup where Tennessee allows the 11th most PPR points to the wide receiver position over their last 3 games. So squarely in play for me as a wide receiver 2. Could get some wide receiver 1 upside. This game is really interesting from the San Francisco side. San Francisco, they're 12.5 point favorites in a game with a 44.5 point total. They're playing at home here. I like the spots that, Brock Purdy, George Kittle, obviously we talked about Jon Jennings. Ricky Pearsall, I keep an eye on him, but I'm not going to recommend him in this game, although it makes all the sense in the world. And then on the other side, obviously Christian McCaffrey, but on the other side, you have the Tennessee, and I can't play Cam Ward. I think you could play Tony Pollard because of the volume, but don't expect the same production we got last week. But then the wide receivers, San Francisco allows the 12th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. So Shimmery DK, I think, is an interesting wide receiver 3 flex option, wide receiver 4 flex option. Alec Manor, same thing. But that's really going to be it for me in this game. All right, let's talk Green Bay against Denver, and let's talk Green Bay wide receiver Christian Watson. He's a wide receiver 28, according to expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros. Back-to-back games with at least 4 receptions, 80 yards, and a touchdown. Wide receiver 1 finishes in 3 of his last 4 games. And then the part that I think people are probably understating is Denver over their last 3 games has allowed the 9th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers. So, better spot than we would typically think going into a matchup against Denver. And Christian Watson is, he's been the most productive wide receiver in this offense over the last 3-4 games, right? He's got 3 wide receiver 1 finishes over his last 4. Jaden Reed came back last week, but he was only fairly involved. I think he's another guy that we can get into our lineups this week. Jordan Love, I think, he's the expert consensus quarterback 16, but Denver allows the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So he's a guy that I would play. I'd play him ahead of Bo Nix, who's in the same game. And I think expert consensus agrees. Bo Nix is the quarterback 19. I'm not really excited to play any of the Denver pass catchers, though. RJ Harvey, think I play him. He's in a good spot. Josh Jacobs, we're monitoring him. He didn't practice on Wednesday or Thursday with the knee injury. Got an MRI just to see if he's making the issue in his knee worse. So Emmanuel Wilson, have him on deck and ready to go. And like I said, the dream with Troy Franklin is dead. It's dead. It's gone, guys. I'm sorry. It was fun while it lasted. It was a lot of fun while it lasted. All right. Let's move on to the next game. Let's talk Minnesota against the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm going to right a wrong from earlier this week, and that's including J.J. McCarthy here as an option. He's the expert consensus quarterback 18. I didn't put him in the waiver show just because I did not have – even going in the Washington game, he came out as a really solid option. When I looked at it, it's just I could not bring myself to recommend him as a play just because it had been so bad for so long with McCarthy. And still, he threw 3 touchdown passes, but only threw 168 passing yards. So, still didn't feel great coming out of that one. But in this one, he's got Dallas, who allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. And again, coming off a QB9 finish, he at least should have been mentioned. But, I think if you are in need of quarterback, I think you can play him this week. I know this hindsight's 2020, but I like, obviously I brought up Kirk Cousins as an option ahead of JJ McCarthy. So I liked Kirk Cousins a lot going into this matchup. I wrote about him in our Thursday Night Picks preview article that drops every Thursday morning on the Patreon. So not really hindsight, but JJ McCarthy, there's the other streaming options that I have. I think where I probably messed up, right, is I had Shadur over him, which I probably should have had JJ McCarthy in there ahead of Shadur, just given the matchup that he's walking into this week. But Stroud and Kirk Cousins, I was firmly adamant that I have them ahead of JJ McCarthy. So in this matchup, I think people are probably wondering, what do you do with Justin Jefferson? He's the expert consensus wide receiver 17. So Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings is signaling you to possibly play him. And I know I wrote about him in the, the sell, in the sell portion of the cheat sheet a couple weeks ago. But I look at this matchup and I'm like, there's no way I can't play him. But I don't have Justin Jefferson in leagues that are, let's just put it this way. All my Justin Jefferson teams, dynasty teams, are eliminated. I don't have Justin Jefferson in redraft. I have him in dynasty, and all of those teams are eliminated. So do with that information what you will. But I'm not sitting here having to make a decision personally on my fantasy teams about Justin Jefferson. But what I would say is probably have him as a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 2. If you can pair him with a safe option, right? Like maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't play and you're getting Michael Wilson in there, And if you can play him alongside of Justin Jefferson, maybe you feel a little bit better about that. But if you had to play Michael Wilson or Justin Jefferson, I'm playing Michael Wilson. But the matchup with Dallas here is really good. So you're hoping at some point that it comes together. But with how bad it's been for Justin Jefferson, I cannot blame anybody for sitting him in this matchup. On the Dallas side, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, the matchup doesn't look great. Minnesota allows the 31st most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games, but I'm playing those guys. No questions asked. Dak Prescott, not in a great spot himself. Minnesota allows the 32nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. So he's also not in a great spot, but I will stay in the flames with Dak Prescott and I will play him. And then that's really it, right? On the Minnesota side, you could play the running backs, Aaron Jones, maybe even Jordan Mason. I've liked Jordan Mason, what he's done quite a bit, but it's kind of unpredictable in that backfield, especially with the usage for Aaron Jones. But 9th most PPR points allowed by Dallas to the running back position over their last 3 games. So good spot for the running backs here. If you need some help at the position, you're looking for like an RB3 flex option here for you. All right, let's move on to the final game, Monday Night Football. We've got Pittsburgh hosting the Miami Dolphins. And let's talk Pittsburgh wide receiver DK Metcalf. Expert consensus wide receiver 23. It has not been a very good season here for DK Metcalf. We wrote him in the Sell article weeks ago, back in like week 4, week 5. But this past week, season highs in targets, receptions, and yards. Miami allows the 14th most PPR points to the wide receiver position over their last 3 games. So I think we're hoping that he can keep this going here against Miami. And I would take the shot on him, right? I think I would take the shot on DK Metcalf over Justin Jefferson, right? That's a move I would make. But outside of that, in this game, I don't really want anybody else, right? Other than Jalen Waddle, other than Devon Achane, like there's no other options that I'm looking to play. Like, Jalen Warren, of course, and Kenneth Gainwell. What do you do with a Kenneth Gainwell? He's the expert consensus running back 36. It just feels like when I want to play Kenneth Gainwell, it doesn't work out well. And then when I don't play Kenneth Gainwell because it didn't work out well for me the week before, it works out well, but not for me because he's on my bench. So, but I think if you need help at the position, you can definitely roll him out there and you could do worse as an RB3 or flex option. All right, let's get into week 15 starts of the week. And let's recap week 14. It was a really good week 14, right? We had Matthew Stafford coming in as the QB4. We had Chase Brown come in as the RB6, Michael Wilson come in as a wide receiver 1, and our only miss of the week last week, Dalton Schultz. So finishes the tight end 23. So we had the wide receiver 1, the running back 6, and the quarterback 4 last week. So let's keep that going this week. And we'll start with the quarterback position. And let's talk San Francisco quarterback Brock Purdy. Has only played 5 games this season, missing a chunk of time with injury. So he only has 2 QB1 finishes on the season. And managers out there are probably feeling a little bit iffy about him entering the first round of the fantasy playoffs. However, this is not the week for that. He's at home. He's a large favorite facing a Tennessee defense, allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the quarterback position over their last 3 games. So Purdy has top 6 upside at the position this week. Let's move on to the running back position, and let's talk Jacksonville running back Travis Etienne. Etienne has 3 RB1 finishes over his last 4 games. He's got a running back rush share of 72% over the last 3 weeks, and now gets a New York Jets defense allowing the most PPR points to the running back position over their last 3 games. They've allowed 3 running backs to go over 90 rushing yards the last 2 weeks. And no, I did not misspeak. 3 running backs over the last 2 weeks have gone for over 90 rushing yards against the New York Jets. So yeah, do with that information what you will. Travis Etienne he's been killing. The matchup is in a perfect spot here. So we're just going to continue to go with him there from that perspective. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's talk Houston wide receiver Nico Collins. Since week 9, Collins is the wide receiver 18 in PPR points per game, 17.9 PPR points. During that span, he's second in the position in targets, second amongst wide receivers in total receiving yards, second among wide receivers in end zone targets. Yeah, we're playing this guy, right? Of course we're playing him. But now he gets an Arizona defense allowing the 8th most PPR points over their last 3 games. So let's stay in the flames with Nico Collins. Let's start this man up. And last but not least, let's talk the tight end position. And I teased it earlier, but if with the if you know, which doesn't really work out for me ever. So I don't even know why I say it, but I'm superstitious, but also like not at the same time. So yeah, we're going with Theo Johnson. He's seen at least 4 targets in each game since week 4. He's 10th at the position in target share inside the 5-yard line. So he's always a good chance to score. And now he gets a Washington defense allowing the 5th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. So Theo Johnson, not just a guy we can stream this week, but a guy we can start confidently this week. All right, y'all. That's all I have for my starts of the week. That's all I have for the Week 15 matchup show. So that's going to be a wrap. Again, it's win or go home season, so trust your process, play the right matchups. Don't overthink the decisions you've been preparing for all year. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you like the video, subscribe, turn on those notifications so you don't miss another one. We'll be back on Tuesday to cover the waiver show for Week 16. And hopefully by then you will have advanced to the semifinals of your fantasy playoffs. Or maybe have a bye week, you're chilling, and you are waiting for the second round of the fantasy playoffs and just seeing who you're going to play. Well, while you do that, remember, if you got to buy, bench your team. I'm not going to get into all of it now, but bench your whole roster. If you want to know why, go back to the waiver show. I have a very thorough explanation as to why it's advantageous for you to bench your entire roster when you have a bye week. But make sure to check out the FFDX Patreon to get access to the full cheat sheet. And for $1 a month, you can get the waiver wire article, expanded rankings, and the access to the Sunday Q&A, which will be Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern this weekend. So all of that is available at patreon.com/FFDX. And those extra perks are available for just $1 a month. So appreciate y'all tuning in this morning. Or maybe you're tuned in later if you're listening on podcasts. So I appreciate you there as well. Good luck in all your week 15 playoff matchups. Go get those wins, and I'll catch y'all on Saturday for the Sunday Q&A. And if not, I'll catch y'all on Tuesday for the waiver show. Peace.